You've been told you're too sensitive, too intense, too emotional, and for years you believed it was your flaw. But here's the brutal truth. Feeling too much isn't weakness, it's sight, raw, unfiltered sight. You notice what others train themselves to ignore. The twitch at the corner of a smile that betrays a hidden grudge. The silence between "I'm fine" and the storm underneath. The way a crowd laughs louder when they're secretly afraid. For most people, these signals vanish in the noise. For you, they crash like thunder, and it hurts, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. You've tried to dull it, to blend in, to tell yourself, don't read into it. Don't feel so much, but no matter how hard you try, your perception cuts through the surface, like walking through a masquerade where every mask is transparent only to you. This is the curse of clarity, carrying the weight of truths no one asked you to hold. But it's also the gift, the kind that burns, the kind that sets you apart. Because maybe your sensitivity was never fragility. Maybe it was the mark of an old soul, born awake in a world desperate to stay asleep. And as Carl Jung once suggested, there's no coming to consciousness without pain. What you carry, this unbearable awareness, is not random. It is the very process of awakening. It is the old soul's initiation into depth, into shadow, into truth. So if you've ever wondered why the world feels heavier in your hands than in theirs, this is why. And this is where your story begins. In the next steps, we'll explore not only your lived experience, but also Jung's lens on why those who feel too much see into the hidden architecture of society itself, and why the old soul is both burdened and blessed by this vision. You've always felt like you don't quite belong, not because you're broken, but because your awareness runs deeper than the surface language most people live in. You notice when someone's story doesn't match the flicker in their eyes. You sense the chill in the room even when everyone forces a smile. You hear the unsaid, the motives, the disappointments, the fear that hides beneath the practiced tone. For you, silence is never empty. It is full of signals, whispers, and truths that others deny. Most people filter these things out. Their psyche protects them with blindness. But you carry the raw feed of reality, unedited. That's why you've been called too intense, too analytical, too old for your age. But Jung would tell you something else. He would say this is not just hypersensitivity. It is the whisper of an archetype moving through you. Think of the sage, the archetype of the wise one. Not the smiling guru on a mountain, but the weary figure who sees patterns too clearly, who feels history repeating in every human gesture. The sage is often lonely because wisdom isolates, yet it also protects, giving vision where others stumble blind. If you've ever felt older than your years, it's because this archetypal energy has marked you as one of its vessels, and it doesn't stop there. Jung believed every psyche carries both anima and animus, the inner feminine and the inner masculine. Most people barely hear these voices inside them, but for the hyper-aware, they are loud. They argue, they guide, they warn. Sometimes your sensitivity comes not only from observing the world outside, but from feeling the dialogues of these inner figures as if they were real presences. That's why you may feel torn between tenderness and intensity, between intuition and logic, because both sides live vividly within you. And perhaps the strangest part, what you sense in others is not always theirs alone. Jung spoke of the collective unconscious, a reservoir of shared symbols, instincts, and fears. The outsider, the old soul, often becomes a receiver of these hidden currents. It explains why you sometimes feel grief that isn't yours, or perceive conflict before it erupts. You are tapping into something larger, the atmosphere of the human mind itself. That's why being around people can be overwhelming. It isn't just their words you absorb, it's their shadows, their unlived truths, the archetypal dramas they themselves are blind to. You carry their weight, as if your nervous system were wired into the collective. And yet, this sensitivity is not here to crush you. Jung would remind us, the psyche pushes us toward individuation, becoming who we truly are beyond masks and roles. Your old soul awareness is not an accident. It is the self calling you, nudging you toward a destiny larger than comfort. So if you've ever felt like an outsider, if you've ever wondered why the world treats your perception as too much, hear this. You are not simply different. You are an expression of deeper forces. You are the sage archetype walking in a noisy world, the one who feels the tremors beneath the surface. You are the carrier of dialogues most people silence, the receiver of currents they refuse to name. You are not alone in this. You are part of a scattered lineage, those few across generations who feel too deeply, see too clearly, and carry too much. And this is why the world resists you, but it is also why the world needs you. The sharper your sight, the heavier the shadows you carry. That's the paradox of feeling too much. Because while others glide through life half asleep, you carry the weight of every unspoken word, every false smile, every fracture in the room's energy. And it's exhausting. You walk into a conversation, and it's not just the words you hear. You hear the fear behind the laughter. You hear the resentment disguised as politeness. You hear the plea for help behind a casual, "I'm fine." Most people move past these moments untouched. You, on the other hand, absorb them like fire through dry wood. And when you're alone, you replay them, dissect them, feel them all over again. It makes you tired in ways no sleep can fix. It makes crowds unbearable, small talk painful, and relationships complicated. Because how do you unsee what you've already seen? How do you unknow the truth that sits behind the performance? And here lies the cruel paradox. What isolates you is the very thing that makes you valuable. The sensitivity that drains you is the same sensitivity that lets you understand people at depths they themselves can't reach. The awareness that makes you lonely is the same awareness that makes you extraordinary. But no one celebrates that in the moment. Instead, you're told, stop overthinking. Don't be so sensitive. Lighten up as if blindness were the cure, as if ignorance were the armor. And a part of you has wished for that armor, wished to not care so much, to not read so much, to not carry every room inside your chest. But another part of you knows, if you dulled this gift, you'd lose the essence of who you are. Carl Jung once warned that the modern soul suffers not from too little, but from too much consciousness. And maybe that's your real wound. Not that you feel too much, but that you're forced to live in a society that pretends feeling is weakness. It's like being the only one awake in a house full of sleepers. At first, you try to shake them, to wake them, to share what you see. But when they resist, when they turn against you, you start to wonder, maybe it would be easier to lie down and dream with them. And yet, you can't. You're cursed with awareness. You can't slip back into the illusion because once the curtain is pulled, the stage looks different forever. That's why so many old souls retreat. Not because they hate people, but because they feel people too deeply. Not because they're cold, but because they burn with empathy. And sometimes the only way to survive is solitude, not as escape, but as recovery. Here is the paradox that defines you. Your pain comes from the same source as your power. Your curse is also your crown. And the very thing that leaves you feeling alone is the thing that ties you to the rarest lineage of souls. You may think your struggle is personal, that your sensitivity, your unbearable awareness is some private burden. But look closer and you'll see, this path has been walked before. Old souls have always carried this tension between what is seen and what is denied, between truth and illusion. And they were rarely celebrated for it in their time. Think of the women who felt the absurdity of the roles forced upon them. Take Princess Diana. To the world, she was the fairy tale bride, the smiling icon draped in beauty and privilege. But behind the mask, she carried the hyper-awareness of someone who saw too much, the emptiness of rituals, the suffocation of appearances, the unspoken cruelty of institutions. She once admitted, "I knew what my role was, but I never knew what my heart was allowed to feel." And for daring to live her truth, she was shamed, isolated, hunted. But today, she is remembered not as a princess of perfection, but as a woman who broke the spell of silence, the old soul who saw through the performance of royalty and revealed its human cost. And millions who feel too much still whisper, "She was one of us." Or think of the artists who painted what the world refused to see. Vincent van Gogh, mocked, dismissed, labeled mad. But what was his madness? It was sight that burned too bright. He saw colors vibrating where others saw flatness. He felt emotions in brushstrokes that others could not bear to confront. His sunflowers weren't just flowers. They were a hymn to life, fragile and fierce. The world couldn't hold his vision, but now his work defines the very way we think about beauty, pain, and truth. What crushed him then inspires millions now. And then there are the philosophers, those who asked questions society was afraid to face. Søren Kierkegaard, called eccentric, dismissed as depressive, but he dared to say, the crowd is untruth. He saw what most ignore, that blending in, living by borrowed opinions, is not life, but avoidance. His words, once ridiculed, now stand as prophecy, and every old soul who resists the noise of the crowd feels the echo of his solitude. These are not exceptions. They are reminders that the pain you feel is not proof you are weak. It is proof you are tuned to a frequency most deny. That your alienation is not a private curse. It is a universal pattern. Every generation has carried its seers, its truth-bearers, its weary visionaries. Jung would call this the journey of individuation, the soul breaking away from the collective trance, forced to see beyond masks and illusions. And society always resists, because illusions are comfortable, and those who pierce them become dangerous. But history shows what you already suspect. The world eventually turns to its outsiders. It mocks them, it isolates them, it breaks them down until time passes, and suddenly their vision becomes the foundation for a new way of seeing. That's the hero's journey no one talks about. Not the triumphant victory, but the lonely passage through misunderstanding. The myth is not just in books, it's in every old soul who refuses to betray their vision, even when the world calls it madness. So when you feel like your sensitivity makes you weak, remember Diana walking through palaces that felt like prisons. Remember Van Gogh painting light that burned him alive. Remember Kierkegaard shouting into the silence of a crowd that didn't want to hear. And remember this, you stand in their lineage. You are not merely a person who feels too much. You are part of the scattered few across centuries who carried unbearable sight, and who in time became the very mirror the world could no longer avoid. So here you are, carrying this unbearable awareness. And the question echoes, is it destroying you or is it shaping you? Because make no mistake, it can do both. Your sensitivity can cut you open. It can make you feel like you're drowning in noise, like every lie is poison in your veins, like every silence is a scream you can't escape. It can isolate you, turn you into a ghost in your own life, watching but never belonging. And many old souls stay here. They collapse under the weight of what they see. They retreat so far inward that their vision becomes a prison. But it doesn't have to end there. Because the same perception that threatens to destroy you is also the one thing that can make you powerful beyond measure. Your hyper-awareness can be weapon, compass, and shield if you learn to hold it instead of letting it hold you. Think of it this way, fire can burn down a house, but in the right hands, fire forges steel, cooks food, brings light. Your sensitivity is fire. Untamed, it scorches. Channeled, it illuminates. Here's the paradox no one tells you. The very thing that feels like your curse is the raw material of your crown. History remembers this. The same vision that isolated Van Gogh redefined art. The same clarity that made Kierkegaard a lonely eccentric now shapes how we understand truth. The same vulnerability that broke Diana became her enduring power. She dared to show the world that masks suffocate and hearts deserve to breathe. And Jung would remind us, every archetype holds both shadow and light. The sage can collapse into bitterness or rise into wisdom. The old soul can sink into despair or stand as a mirror no one else dares to hold. The difference is not the gift itself, but what you choose to do with it. So ask yourself, will your perception stay as burden, making every day heavier? Or will you train it into strength, turning it into insight, art, leadership, love? Because there is no middle ground. Hyper-awareness will either erode you or it will transform you. And maybe that's why you were born with it. Not to suffer endlessly, but to face the fire and to choose what it becomes. Your curse or your crown, your weight or your weapon, your solitude or your strength. The choice is yours. So what now? You feel too much. You see too much. You carry what no one else admits is even there. How do you live with this without being crushed by it? The answer isn't to erase your sensitivity. It's to learn strategic sensitivity. Not turning it off, but shaping it, channeling it, choosing where to aim it. Here are 5 practices that can transform the weight into power. 1. The silence filter. The world shouts, advertisements, opinions, endless noise. For most people, it blurs into background static. For you, it cuts straight into your nervous system. That's why you need structured silence. Not silence as avoidance, but silence as filter. One sacred hour a day where no voices, no screens, no demands enter. Just you and the raw world, the rustle of leaves, the hum of your breath, the sound of your own thought. In that silence, the chaos drains. What's left is clarity. 2. The shadow journal. Most people journal what happened. You instead record what you felt that no one said. Write the undercurrents, the tension, the withheld words, the emotional climate of the room. Over time, you'll see patterns. You'll notice that your too much is not random at all. It's precision. You're tracking truths the world hides. And when you see that on paper, it validates the gift you keep doubting. 3. Selective openness. Your sensitivity is not for everyone. You cannot and should not pour your perception into people who weaponize it or dismiss it. Old souls survive by practicing selective openness, choosing who gets access to their inner world. Not walls, but gates. And only those who prove they can hold your truth with care earn entry. This is not coldness. This is wisdom. 4. Alchemy of expression. What you feel must not rot inside you. It must be given form. For Van Gogh, it was color. For Kierkegaard, words. For Diana, presence. For you, maybe it's art, writing, strategy, teaching, or building something no one else imagined. The rule is simple. If you don't express it, it consumes you. If you shape it, it empowers you. Your sensitivity was never meant to stay silent. 5. The archetypal anchor. When the weight feels unbearable, remember, you are not just you. You are the vessel of something larger. Jung called it the self, the deep center of the psyche that pushes us toward wholeness. Anchor yourself in that lineage, the sage, the seer, the old soul. You are not random, not broken. You are carrying a myth that has always existed, and myths are not lived alone. They are lived as part of a greater story. When you recall this, the pain shrinks, not because it disappears, but because it takes its rightful place, part of the initiation, not the end. These practices won't erase the paradox. They won't make you blind like the crowd, but they will give you balance, the ability to feel deeply without being drowned, to see clearly without being shattered. Because sensitivity without strategy is suffering, but sensitivity with strategy, that is power, and that's what the world needs from you. Not to collapse under the noise, but to stand, to filter, to shape, to mirror, to be the one who feels too much and turns it into truth others can finally understand. Maybe now you understand what has haunted you your whole life, that unbearable sensitivity, that constant question, why do I feel everything so deeply when others move through life untouched? The answer was never that you were broken. The answer is that you were awake, because feeling too much is not a weakness. It is proof of life unfiltered. It is the old soul's gift, the one that sees, that feels, that refuses to play dead in a world addicted to numbness. Yes, it hurts. Yes, it isolates. But look at the pattern. Every visionary, every truth-bearer, every heart that refused to stay silent has walked this same lonely path. You are not the exception. You are the continuation. And here's the catharsis. Your curse has always been your crown. Your wound has always been your weapon. Your solitude has always been the proof of your belonging, not to the crowd, but to the scattered few who feel too much across centuries, across borders, across generations. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And maybe that's what your sensitivity has been asking of you all along. To stop apologizing for it, to stop wishing it away, to start seeing it not as burden, but as initiation. Because the world doesn't need more people who can pretend. It doesn't need more masks. It needs those rare souls who feel deeply enough to tell the truth, even when it costs them, especially when it costs them. And now it needs you. So if these words found you, if they felt like a mirror, if you've ever whispered to yourself, "I feel too much," then maybe it's time to admit that's not your flaw. That's your proof of being alive. Tell me your story. Share the moment when you realized you were different, when you felt the weight others ignored, because someone else reading your words might finally realize they are not alone. And if you want to keep walking this path with me, this journey of old souls, outsiders, and truth seekers, then stay, subscribe, share this with someone who feels lost, and let's build a space where sensitivity is not shame, but strength. Because this is not the end, it's the beginning of a lineage finding itself again. And maybe one of the next videos could be about this very path, how old souls can turn their hyper-awareness into a language the world finally understands. But only if you tell me you want it. If enough of us, the sensitive few, raise our hands and say yes, then that won't just be a topic. It will be a shared process worth unfolding together. Until then, protect your light and never again doubt the fire inside you.